Hello, and welcome to Vintage Talk, one word, our newest and grooviest podcast here at EvCo. I'm your host, Evan, and with me is my other host, Archer.
Hello.
And today, we're going to be talking about two brand new items, which are not actually brand new because they're old, and we also got them a while ago, so they're really not brand new in any sense of the word. But
however, we enjoy them.
We enjoy them, and we haven't told each other exactly what we are holding. So we're
But
going
we haven't been hiding it too well.
We haven't been hiding it too well either, so...
Evan's been nervously passing it around his... I don't know.
I'm just trying to,
I've seen it 5 times already.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
And then my thing is just sitting plainly in front of us. But
yeah, but I'm actively trying not to read the cover.
Good.
So, there we go. You started off last time, so do you want me to start off this time?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so what I'm holding is the CD to the motion picture soundtrack of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, released 1989, starring Keanu Reeves in an early role. Actually, maybe his first movie role.
Really?
One of his first. Now, before I jump into this, have you seen this movie?
No.
No. Okay. Just wanted to clarify because if you had, then I didn't want to explain too much about it. But the movie is, of course, a time travel movie. It's one of the more famous, at least to come out of the 80s. And it's kind of it's almost an indie film. But I don't know that I'd go
put it up
that far.
Yeah,
but it was a small movie, and the budget was not large, and the special effects certainly show that. All that to say, it is remarkable how good of a movie it is.
In spite of all that.
In spite of all that, in a cheesy way. But
yeah. I mean, it's the 80s.
Yeah. But if anything makes this movie truly great, it is the soundtrack. This is one of the most underrated soundtracks ever. I kid you not. Nobody talks about this soundtrack.
So do you want to run us through kind of some of the more notable songs on this?
Sure. Well, the movie opens with I Can't Break Away by Big Pig, which is not a band that I know of outside of this soundtrack. In fact, I don't think any of these bands, except Extreme,
or have any notoriety outside of this.
Right.
Yeah.
But I Can't Break Away is memorable. The opening credits are kind of cool. But probably the most, I'll say, effective song is called In Time by Robbie Robb, which doesn't even sound like an 80s name to me, really.
Not really, no.
But this is, I think, a song that if you actually pay attention to the lyrics and whatnot, it is a very uplifting, positive outlook on the future of mankind. And the movie as a whole kind of seems to, just root itself in what this song talks about. And so I like the idea of just everything that this movie stands for because of that.
And a lot of that's kind of
it's very 80s. It's very, we'll be dancing in the streets all night in the future kind of thing. Everybody will be happy. But I like that, I'm kind of a cheesy guy when it comes to songs, so I'm down with that.
So is there any overriding genre for these songs?
I would mostly call them rock.
Okay.
Or some variety of it. Even though it was 1989, so rap was kind of, to my knowledge, starting to come onto the scene.
Yeah, 90s rap was definitely very prominent.
Yeah. I know off the top of my head that there's a John Candy movie also from '89 called Uncle Buck.
Okay.
And in Uncle Buck, that was supposedly one of the first movies, one of the first teen-focused movies to feature teenagers choosing rap over rock.
Okay.
At the party scene.
So it's kind of on that sort of passing of the baton.
Which is maybe why it wasn't noticed so much now that I think about it.
It was a little bit maybe out of place then?
Yeah, perhaps. But regardless, everybody talks about, the Days of Confused soundtrack and the Fast Times at Ridgemont High soundtrack, but nobody talks about Bill and Ted. However, ever since I saw this movie, I'd always loved it. Now, the reason the CD itself is special to me, it's actually less special now, unfortunately.
Oh.
But you got to go back to whenever I was 17 or 18, whenever it was.
Yeah.
A few years ago, the Bill and Ted soundtrack was not available on iTunes or Spotify or any streaming service for music.
If you wanted to listen to it, it was hard to access.
Yeah, exactly. You could really only listen to maybe a couple of the songs on YouTube, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so when you looked on like Amazon or whatever, they were all extremely expensive because it was rare. But I was walking through, I don't even think it was Frisco. I think it was a pretty far out record store that was actually quite large. And I mean, my whole family was there, so we must have been stopping there in the middle of a road trip or something. But I was just wandering the very vast aisles of CDs, and lo and behold, I found the only copy of Bill and Ted's soundtrack there on the shelves for only $7.98.
So,
which is pretty good.
What's the price that you usually see this for online?
Online, it could, I mean, probably depends on the condition, but as I remember it, it was up there in the double digits for sure. It was to the point of like, it had to have been to the point of $30 to $50 or more, because that's about the price where I don't pay just for music. You know, that's kind of my limit.
That's kind of entering the point where like you really have to like the item.
And the other thing is that I just don't tend to trust online purchases as much. And so when they're that expensive, for fear of, I guess, getting something wrong with the order and not being able to get my money back or whatever, I just usually don't buy things that are that highly priced. So I found this, and I have played it many times on my CD player, probably more than any of the other CDs I own, and I have a handful. But anyway, the Bill and Ted soundtrack is near and dear to my heart, and this is probably my favorite CD that I own. So yeah, you all should go give this a listen. It is now on iTunes
that it's available widely.
So yeah, I would recommend it absolutely if you're an 80s rockhead or just at all interested in the pop culture or music appreciator. And you haven't heard this soundtrack,
there's a little something for everybody.
For sure. Maybe, I don't know. There's probably only stuff for one type of person.
But maybe not so much for like the smooth jazz aficionados.
What can I say? I'm the type of...
What can you say?
I'm the target audience here, okay, Archer? There's a reason I like it so much.
Exactly. Yeah. All right.
You can take yours away now.
So in front of me, I have this giant tome. It's simply called Le 1900.
Wait, what's a tome?
A book.
Oh. I don't know what a tome is. Don't just be throwing out random verbiage like that.
This is facade all over again. Anyways.
Don't go back down that road.
So yeah, it's just simply called Le 1900. I'd say 1900 in French, but I don't know French. But it is ostensibly a French book. More specifically, it covers Art Nouveau and that specific aesthetic genre that came about in the early 1900s and lingered on for a little bit, but was mostly replaced by Art Deco. So Evan can also see this. It is very thoroughly
there are
stacked.
A ton of sticky notes in this thing.
And so I've been through this book a lot, and it covers all aspects of design surrounding the Art Nouveau movement specific to Paris. So you have a lot of interiors. So right now there's this spread where you have a bunch of theaters, dining salons, that sort of thing. And they're all very regally ornamented, highly detailed. There is some text I cannot read because it is also in French.
Oh, is it really?
Yes, it is.
That's a shame.
So I'm sure that there's more information to be gotten from here, but alas, I do not feel like minoring in French to understand it.
Who does?
In the meantime, I'll enjoy the visuals.
Yeah.
So now there's a bunch of doors, windows. Now it's getting into a lot of the art, the 2D murals that came out of the era. One of the common focuses of the Art Nouveau movement was the feminine form as representation of different things. So this is, it preceded the Art Nouveau moment a little bit, but it's in the same vein of how we have Lady Liberty. How you have this female manifestation of a certain ideal. Or you have, I forgot what it was called, but it was basically the personification of manifest destiny.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
It's that famous painting where it's like the lady with the torch leading the wagons
right
across
in the sky, and
So there's a lot of that same focus on feminine form as allegory, metaphor, or ideal. So that reoccurs a lot in this art. There's different ways of picturing for not only feminine figures, but also nature is a very common aspect. So I'm showing Evan this one page right now. just the decorating around the wording itself is very floral, and this manifested in a lot of the posters, a lot of the architecture. It was a very bucolic movement, I guess. Here's a really good example of the furniture. They made pieces of furniture that looked like trees, where the legs of the table would themselves be giant branches, or you'd have leaf decorations all over.
Which that sort of thing you still see all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and this is where a lot of that kind of natural imagery first came into play.
Right, yeah.
But the Art Nouveau movement is also interesting because it's where you get a lot of early modernist ideas. So what we've been looking at so far was very regally ornamented, very flowery, very pictorial, whereas still elaborate by today's standards, but there's a few pieces of furniture, a few pieces of architecture that are comparatively simple. And this mirrors certain prominent architectural writers like Adolf Loos, who were proponents of ornament is crime, therefore you should minimize or minimalize. So that's where you start to see the introduction of a lot of modern aesthetic as well. So it's this very interesting cultural point in time where you see a lot of this highly detailed, highly classical ornamentation, but you also see new influences or new ways of doing things. And that's what this book celebrates for the most part.
Okay. In your own just art exploration and the designs that you've done, is there like something particular from this book that like has influenced you on a piece or anything like that?
Nothing too notable. The architecture is what primarily interests me. But I do think that the pieces that do speak most to me are the early modernist works in here. So there's some impressionism as well, and a lot of this very simplified geometric design, which was the predecessor of Art Deco, which embellishes that idea even more. But I think I don't really use this book as reference for my own work, but more so as kind of a starting point for a lot of my other research into different aesthetics, because I feel a lot of them can either be traced to this movement or this time period.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, speaking of time periods, it is now time to end this episode.
Yes.
We hope you all enjoyed, and we will see you next time. Archer, bid goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye.